My girlfriend said platonic friendships are so important, and he is like a brother to me, as I asked about her childhood friend. My world collapsed when a classmate casually revealed they dated 4 years. The discovery method was so random, it feels like the universe was trying to tell me something. At 23, I thought I had a pretty good handle on reading people and situations. I am a senior in college, maintaining my academic scholarship through disciplined study habits and what I believed was solid judgment. Little did I know that 8 months of my life had been built on a foundation of carefully orchestrated deception. My girlfriend Madison seemed perfect when we met last spring. She possessed this effortless charm that drew people to her, myself included. During our second date, she mentioned her childhood best friend Landon with the kind of casual affection that made me think nothing of it. "He is like a brother to me," she had said, smiling warmly. "We have known each other since we were kids. You will love him when you meet him." What she didn't tell me was that this brother had been her boyfriend for 4 years throughout high school, and that their breakup had nothing to do with falling out of love and everything to do with choosing different colleges. The signs were there from the beginning, though I dismissed each red flag with the kind of trust that now makes me question my own judgment. Landon attended every group hangout we had. He joined family vacations with Madison's parents, who treated him with the warmth typically reserved for family members. Most telling of all, he had unlimited access to Madison's time and attention in ways that made me increasingly uncomfortable. When I would express concern about their closeness, Madison had perfected the art of making me feel like the problem. She would tilt her head with practiced concern and say things like, "Blake, I really need you to trust me on this. Platonic friendships are so important, and I thought you were more secure than this." The manipulation was subtle but effective. I found myself apologizing for having normal reactions to abnormal situations. When they took a 3-day beach trip together last month while I stayed behind for finals week, I convinced myself that being the understanding boyfriend was more important than honoring my instincts. What I didn't realize was that Madison had been testing my boundaries systematically, measuring exactly how much deception I would accept before pushing back. For 8 months, I passed every test by failing to advocate for basic honesty in our relationship. The truth emerged in the most mundane way possible. Yesterday afternoon, I was deep in thesis research at the library when Paige Sullivan from my web design class approached my table. We had developed a casual friendship over the semester, bonding over late-night coding sessions, and shared frustration with our professor's impossible deadlines. "Mind if I sit here?" Paige asked, gesturing to the empty chair across from me. "Everywhere else is packed." I welcomed the company, and we fell into easy conversation about our upcoming presentations. Paige mentioned seeing Madison and Landon at a downtown coffee shop earlier that morning, looking deep in conversation over matching laptops. "They make such a cute couple," Paige said absently while opening her textbook. "It is sweet how they stayed together after high school. Most relationships don't survive that transition." The words hit me like a physical blow. My fingers stopped moving across the keyboard as I processed what she had just said. "I am sorry. What did you say about them being a couple?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Paige looked up with confusion written across her features. "Madison and Landon. They dated all through high school, right? Like 4 solid years. Everyone at West Valley knew about them because they were one of those couples that seemed destined for marriage." "Why? Is everything okay?" The library suddenly felt too small, too quiet, too exposed. I stared at Paige while my mind raced through 8 months of interactions, conversations, and situations that suddenly made perfect sense when viewed through the lens of this revelation. "Blake, you look like you have seen a ghost," Paige continued. "Did I say something wrong?" I managed to shake my head and mumble something about being surprised, but internally I was drowning. 4 years. They had dated for 4 years, which meant their relationship had been serious, committed, and recent. Madison had introduced Landon as her childhood friend, implying a sibling-like bond that had never crossed romantic lines. After Paige left, I sat motionless for nearly an hour staring at my laptop screen without seeing the words. Every memory from our relationship began reorganizing itself in my mind. The family vacations where Landon was included made sense now because he had been part of the family as Madison's boyfriend for 4 years. The comfortable intimacy between them wasn't the result of lifelong friendship, but recent romantic history. The defensive way Madison reacted when I questioned their dynamic wasn't protectiveness of a friend, but protection of a secret she knew would destroy our relationship. I called in sick to my part-time job and walked home in a daze, my mind cycling through moments when I had felt something was off but convinced myself to ignore my instincts. Madison had been extraordinarily skilled at making me question my own perceptions, and I had been an enthusiastic participant in my own deception. My sister Chelsea called while I was pacing my apartment, and I found myself explaining the situation with a numbness that surprised me. "Blake, honey, I am not sure why this changes anything," Chelsea said after listening to my story. "People date before they meet the person they are supposed to be with. If Madison loves you now, does her past really matter?" But Chelsea was missing the point entirely. This wasn't about jealousy over Madison's romantic history. This was about 8 months of systematic deception about someone who was central to our shared social life. This was about being made to feel guilty for having normal reactions to what I now knew were legitimate concerns. Madison and Landon are supposed to return from their beach trip tomorrow, and I find myself both dreading and anticipating that conversation. Part of me wants to call her immediately and demand explanations, but I suspect that hearing her voice right now would only make this worse. What I keep coming back to is this: if Madison was willing to lie about something this fundamental for 8 months, what else has she been hiding? And perhaps more importantly, how does someone build trust with a partner who has proven herself capable of such elaborate deception? The worst part is remembering how many times she made me feel unreasonable for questioning their dynamic. All those moments when my gut told me something was wrong, and she convinced me the problem was my insecurity, rather than her dishonesty. I am planning to wait until she returns to confront her in person, but honestly, I cannot imagine any explanation that would make this level of deception acceptable. The foundation of our entire relationship has been built on a lie, and I am not sure how you rebuild trust from that kind of rubble. How would you handle discovering something like this? Am I right to feel completely betrayed? Or am I making this bigger than it needs to be? Edit. Thank you for all the responses. Reading through them is helping me realize that my instincts have been right all along, and that being made to feel crazy for wanting basic honesty is itself a form of manipulation. I will update after we talk tomorrow. Update 1. The confrontation happened Sunday afternoon. When Madison returned from her beach trip, she appeared at my apartment door with takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant, and that luminous smile I had fallen in love with 8 months ago. "Surprise," she announced, holding up the food bags. "I came back a day early to spend time with you before your birthday next week." Looking at her standing there, acting completely normal after spending 3 days with her ex-boyfriend, I felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with the smell of pad thai. "We need to talk about Landon," I said, stepping aside to let her in. The transformation was immediate and startling. Her smile disappeared as if someone had flipped a switch, replaced by a defensive wariness that I had seen before but never fully recognized. "What about Landon?" she asked, setting the food on my kitchen counter without looking at me. "I found out you two dated in high school for 4 years. The silence that followed felt endless. Madison stood perfectly still, staring at the takeout containers as if they contained the answers to questions she didn't want to face. When she finally looked up, her expression had shifted to something I could only describe as calculated. "Who told you that?" she asked. Not an apology, not an explanation. Her first instinct was to identify the source of information that threatened her carefully constructed narrative. "Does it matter who told me?" I replied. "What matters is that it is true, and you have been hiding it for 8 months. Madison crossed her arms and leaned against my counter, adopting a posture that radiated defiance rather than remorse. "Why are you bringing this up now, Blake? Why does ancient history matter when we are happy together?" The phrase, ancient history, hit me like a slap. 4 years of serious relationship, ending just before college, was not ancient history. It was recent, significant, and directly relevant to understanding the dynamics I had been navigating blindly. I explained how I had discovered the truth, how betrayed I felt learning that our entire relationship had been built on deliberate deception. Instead of acknowledging my feelings or offering explanations, Madison became increasingly aggressive in her defense. "You are being completely ridiculous, Blake," she said, her voice rising. "That was high school. It ended 2 years ago. It has nothing to do with us. Nothing to do with us? I repeated. Madison, you spend more time with him than you do with me. He comes on family vacations. He has a key to your apartment. You take weekend trips together. How can you say your history with him has nothing to do with our relationship? Because I knew you would react exactly like this, she snapped. I knew you would get jealous and possessive and try to control who I can be friends with. This is exactly why I didn't tell you in the first place. The circular logic was dizzying. She had hidden crucial information because she predicted I would react poorly to being deceived. And now my reaction to discovering the deception was being used as justification for the original lie. I forced myself to stay calm and ask the question that had been haunting me since Paige's revelation in the library. Madison, whose idea was it to hide your history with Landon, yours or his? Another long silence. This time, when she answered, her voice was quieter, but no less defensive. Landon thought it would be easier if we didn't complicate things by bringing up old relationships right away, she admitted. He said most guys cannot handle their girlfriends being close friends with exes. So it was better to let you get to know us before explaining the history. There it was. Her ex-boyfriend had convinced her to deceive me about their relationship so he could maintain unlimited access to her without the complications that honesty might create, and she had gone along with it for 8 months. Madison, do you understand how manipulative that sounds? I asked. Your ex-boyfriend convinced you to lie to your current boyfriend so he could keep his position in your life without interference. It wasn't manipulation, she protested. He was trying to protect our friendship and your feelings at the same time. Protect my feelings by lying to me for 8 months. We were going to tell you eventually. When, after we got engaged, after we moved in together, at what point was I going to be deemed trustworthy enough to know the truth about who I was sharing my girlfriend with? The conversation continued in this circular pattern for nearly 2 hours. Every time I raised a legitimate concern, Madison found a way to reframe my reaction as the real problem. She accused me of being controlling for wanting honesty about her relationship history. She called me insecure for being uncomfortable with the amount of time she spent with her ex. She made me feel guilty for not simply trusting her word that their relationship was purely platonic. The manipulation was so smooth, so practiced, that I found myself apologizing multiple times during the conversation before catching myself and remembering that I wasn't the one who had been deceiving anyone. Then Madison dropped a bombshell that clarified exactly what I had been dealing with for 8 months. Fine. You want complete honesty, she said, tears starting to form in her eyes. Landon does still have feelings for me. He has told me that. And he doesn't like you because he thinks you are not good enough for me and that I am settling. But I chose you, Blake. Doesn't that count for something? I stared at her, trying to process what she had just revealed. Her ex-boyfriend, who she spent more time with than her actual boyfriend, actively disliked me and believed I wasn't worthy of her. And she had known this throughout our entire relationship. Why would you tell me that? I asked. Because you wanted honesty, she replied, as if my desire for truth was unreasonable. Madison, why would you maintain a close friendship with someone who actively dislikes your boyfriend and undermines your relationship? Because he has been part of my life longer than you have. The statement hung in the air between us, revealing priorities that I had been naive not to recognize earlier. In Madison's hierarchy of relationships, length of association trumped current commitment, and Landon's historical claim on her attention superseded my present one. I asked directly if she still had feelings for Landon. She said no, but the hesitation before her answer told me everything I needed to know. As our conversation devolved into accusations and defensive explanations, I began to see patterns I had missed throughout our relationship. Madison's need to be the victim in every story she told. Her skill at making me feel guilty for having normal emotional reactions. Her talent for reframing my concerns as character flaws that I needed to address. The final straw came when I brought up her reaction 2 months ago when I went to see a movie with my ex-girlfriend Sarah, who lives 3 hours away and whom Madison knew about in advance. That was completely different. Madison said without hesitation, Sarah was obviously trying to get back together with you, and Landon isn't trying to get back together with you. That is not the same thing at all. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Madison could maintain an intimate friendship with an ex who admittedly still had feelings for her and actively disliked her current boyfriend. But my seeing a movie with an ex who lived in another city constituted a threat to our relationship. I realized in that moment that I wasn't arguing with someone who was capable of seeing the situation objectively. Madison had constructed a version of reality where her behavior was always justified, and my concerns were always unreasonable, and no amount of logical discussion was going to penetrate that narrative. "I think we should break up," I said quietly. Madison's tears started immediately, along with pleas for me to reconsider, and promises that she would limit her contact with Landon if that is what it took to save our relationship. But it was too late for negotiations. The issue wasn't just the lying, though that was enormous. It was how she had responded to being caught. No genuine remorse, no acknowledgement of how her choices had affected me, no recognition that 8 months of deception might reasonably damage trust between us. Instead, she had spent 2 hours trying to convince me that my desire for honesty was the real problem in our relationship. After Madison left, my best friend Ryan came over with pizza and listened while I processed what had just happened. He pointed out something that I had been too close to the situation to see clearly. "Dude, you have been walking on eggshells around her for months," Ryan observed. "When is the last time you felt completely comfortable just being yourself in that relationship?" He was right. I had been managing Madison's moods and reactions so carefully that I had lost track of my own authentic responses to situations. I had become so focused on being the understanding boyfriend that I had stopped advocating for my own basic needs in the relationship. The most telling part of Ryan's observation was his next question. "What happened to that confident guy I knew before you started dating her?" I couldn't answer him because somewhere in the process of accommodating Madison's need to be right about everything, I had lost myself. Update 2. 1 week after the breakup. It has been a week since I ended things with Madison. The first few days were emotionally complex. I felt relieved to escape the constant mental gymnastics, but also questioned whether I had overreacted. Madison was so skilled at making me doubt my own perceptions. My sister Chelsea completely changed her stance after hearing the full story. Blake. The problem was never that she dated Landon before. The problem is that she lied to your face for 8 months, and when caught, blamed you for caring about being lied to. This helped me realize something crucial. Madison always positioned herself as the victim in every conflict. Coworkers treated her unfairly, professors were biased, family was difficult. She had trained me to believe that questioning her version of events made me unsupportive rather than appropriately cautious. Ryan's observation hit hard. "Blake, you realize you haven't seemed like yourself in months, right? You used to be confident and decisive, trusting your instincts. Dating Madison turned you into someone who second-guessed every reaction." He was right. I would become so accustomed to managing Madison's emotions that I had stopped honoring my own. She isolated me from friends by always having conflicting plans, made me dependent on her validation by criticizing my independent choices. The most insidious part was how gradually it happened. Each incident seemed minor enough to accommodate, but collectively, they eroded my ability to trust my own judgment. Madison has texted several times this week, with variations of "I miss you" and "Can we talk?" I haven't responded. Initially, I felt guilty, then remembered I don't owe conversation to someone who lied to me for 8 months. The biggest realization, how much mental energy I was spending managing someone else's emotions. Now that I am not walking on eggshells or calculating Madison's reactions, I feel lighter and more like myself than I have in almost a year. I have started journaling about the warning signs I missed. Trust should feel natural and easy, not something you have to convince yourself of repeatedly. Transparency about important topics should be a given, not a negotiation. Most importantly, I never want to be with someone who makes me question my instincts again. Those gut feelings I had throughout our relationship were accurate, and I should have honored them instead of being convinced my reactions were the problem. Final update. I hadn't planned to write another update, but something happened yesterday that feels important to share. Both for my own processing and because it might help other men who find themselves in similar situations. Madison appeared at my apartment unannounced yesterday afternoon. I had been successfully ignoring her texts for 2 weeks, so I suppose she decided to escalate her approach to direct contact. When I opened the door, she looked genuinely distressed in a way I had rarely seen during our relationship. Her typically perfect appearance was disheveled. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she had the demeanor of someone who hadn't been sleeping well. "Blake, "I need to tell you everything," she said before I could ask her to leave. "I cannot live with the guilt anymore." Something in her voice made me step aside and let her in. Though every instinct warned me that this conversation would be painful, I lied about more than just hiding that Landon was my ex. She began, settling onto my couch without invitation. I lied about everything. What followed was a confession that confirmed suspicions I had been trying not to acknowledge since our breakup. Madison and Landon had been physical during our relationship, twice. The first incident occurred 2 months ago, after one of their supposed study sessions. According to Madison, Landon had kissed her after they had been drinking wine, and she hadn't stopped him immediately. "I told myself it didn't mean anything," she said, not meeting my eyes. "It was just a moment of weakness, and I felt terrible about it afterward." The second incident happened during that beach trip 3 weeks ago while I was studying for finals. Madison claimed that Landon had gotten drunk and took advantage of the situation, but she admitted that she hadn't resisted his advances. "He would always push boundaries when you weren't around," Madison continued. Little comments about how much he missed being with me, casual touches that lasted too long, references to our shared history that felt inappropriate given that I was dating you. I told him to stop, but I wasn't firm enough about it. As she talked, I found myself feeling oddly detached from the revelations. The betrayal was devastating, but it wasn't surprising. Part of me had known something was happening between them, even while I was allowing Madison to convince me that my suspicions were unfounded. Madison explained that Landon had been systematically undermining our relationship from the beginning. He had convinced her that hiding their history was temporary, until she was sure about her feelings for me. He had planted seeds of doubt about my character and our compatibility whenever they were alone together. He had encouraged her to pick fights with me over minor issues, creating artificial conflict in our relationship. "Landon never wanted me to be happy with you," Madison admitted. "He told me repeatedly that you were just a college phase and that I would eventually come back to him. And gradually, I started believing him." The most manipulative aspect of Landon's strategy was his long-term planning. According to Madison, he had been counting on our relationship ending naturally when I graduated and moved away. He was playing a patient game, maintaining his position in Madison's life while waiting for circumstances to eliminate his competition. "I know you will never trust me again," Madison said through tears. "And you shouldn't. But I needed you to know that your instincts were right about everything. Every concern you raised was valid, and I gaslit you into ignoring red flags that you should have honored." I appreciated Madison's honesty, but it felt like too little, too late. If anything, learning about the physical betrayals confirmed that ending our relationship had been the correct choice. The emotional manipulation would have been sufficient grounds for the breakup. The additional layer of sexual infidelity simply validated my decision. "I would have chosen you," Blake Madison said as she prepared to leave. "If I had been honest from the beginning, if I had set real boundaries with Landon, I would have chosen you every time." "But you didn't choose me," I replied. "For 8 months, every time there was a conflict between what I needed and what Landon wanted, you chose his feelings over mine. You chose his comfort over my right to know the truth about who I was sharing my girlfriend with." Madison nodded, acknowledging the accuracy of my assessment. "I know. I made the wrong choice every single time after she left." I called Ryan and shared the details of her confession. His response perfectly captured my own feelings about the situation. "I know this hurts, man. But honestly, you dodged a massive bullet," Ryan said. "Imagine if you had found out about all this after you were married or had kids together." Ryan's perspective helped me process the strange sense of relief I felt alongside the pain of betrayal. While discovering the full extent of Madison's deception was difficult, it also validated every instinct I had ignored, and every concern Madison had convinced me was unreasonable. I am doing well now. Better than I have in nearly a year.